drive to the building.
Hello?
Hi, hold on one second.
Thank you.
We're being transferred. Just a moment, please.
All right.
Hi, Mr. Neff?
Hi.
Yes, I do have Mr. Blee online with you,
Okay.
along with Mr. Light,
Okay.
Mr. Fox, and Ms. Rodriguez are online.
Okay.
Okay, may I give a dial-in number, just in case if someone is separated during the call this morning, please?
Okay.
It's a toll-free number at 1-800-526-2655. And the identification on this conference will be H as in hotel, T as in Tom, N as in Neff, 5810.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we go on, did the other members get that information that the operator shared? The call-in number? Okay. We'll do roll call.
Mr. Neff?
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. Blee?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yep.
Mr. Light?
Yes.
Ted? Who was that last person?
He's calling for me because I'm in the dentist.
Oh.
Ted.
Okay, Ted, thank you.
Hey, Ted, when it comes to an actual vote, I'd ask that maybe you vote instead of the dental hygienist. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we are in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was sent to the Secretary of State, the Star Ledger, and the Times.
Okay. This meeting is a continuation of a meeting that we had at our last regularly scheduled meeting, and the only two items that are being considered at today's meeting, and we'll take them together, are applications from the Union County Improvement Authority to allow for a forward refunding of certain debt. One is related to a juvenile detection center project that would be refunded when bonds become callable in 2015, and the other is to allow refunding of debt for a Plainfield redevelopment project when debt becomes callable in 2013. The refunding would be underwritten by NW Financial, which is paying an upfront fee to the authority, which upfront payment will help the county address budget challenges. This unusual arrangement has been approved from 2002 to 2006 on fewer than 10 occasions by the local finance board, but it was unusual, and that was what was being facilitated then, and what is being facilitated here is a one-shot budget fix that could result in the public losing out on potentially greater savings in the future, or it could additionally lock in savings for the issuer today that it may otherwise lose if interest rates increase. It was delayed for a vote at the last meeting after a full discussion to give the current deputies attorney general, who weren't here in 2002 to 2006 and reviewed the earlier issuances, an opportunity to thoroughly review the matter and vet all concerns. They have now done so and not found any legal impediments to the transaction. However, as stated at the last meeting, it is a cause for concern to me because public entities are generally at a significant disadvantage to financial sector professionals when risks like this are associated with the transactions. Personally, because this has been approved in the past and it's the first time I've been exposed to this sort of transaction, I don't want to change the rules in the middle of the game without notice. I will likely be voting for it today. But moving forward, I would be highly unlikely to vote in support of this sort of financing ever again. I will have future discussions with the other board members when we're all available, and we do so in open session about when and if we would support these types of things in the future. But at the very least, in the future, I would never vote for something like this unless the applicant comes forward with an application to have the following components. First, the sale of the right to future refunding must be an open and transparent process. It must provide for multiple bids from competitors so that competition will drive the best possible price and terms for the public. In this case, as with past instances, this did not happen. That is legal, but that doesn't mean it's the best policy possible. So in the future, there's going to have to be a very open process. There's going to have to be multiple bids from potential underwriters for the debt. Second, the public entity receiving an upfront payment must have secured its own independent financial advisor who helps solicit competition and offers and assists with the review of whether it makes sense to accept the opportunity risks and whether the fees are reasonable. In this case, it happened, but only after the application was submitted, and Acacia, the financial advisor, did find that the fees were reasonable and that this was appropriate and not an unreasonable transaction from the standpoint of the public agencies. Third, the entity receiving the benefit of the upfront payment will be required to explain what they are doing in the current budget year to reduce spending or otherwise address their budget challenges, so we have confidence that they are not only relying on one-shots for their current budget. In this case, that wasn't contained in the application that was submitted to us, but we did have subsequent phone calls with Union County at the staff level, and they also did go on record at the last meeting that even with this transaction, they'd have, I believe, in excess of 200 layoffs or almost 200 layoffs, and that they would additionally have a tax increase that was close to the maximum permitted under the levy cap. So it's not the case that the county is only relying on this one-shot transaction to otherwise help with a difficult situation. The county would also, where the issuing entity would also in future applications be required to explain what they're going to do in the future to address a structural problem that was addressed with a one-shot and that will be left for another day. Again, we had discussions at the staff level with the county, who is moving forward with certain privatization efforts and is laying off significant employees and is structurally raising its levy. So we did get those answers, but again, only after the application was submitted and only after some discussion at our last meeting. Finally, the application must be submitted by and with a primary contact from the issuing authority itself and not the underwriter or entity that stands to benefit from the future refunding. In this particular case, the authority seemed almost to be an afterthought on this application, and the primary contact was the underwriter themselves. And I make no disparaging remarks about the underwriter. They were doing their job. They did a good job of explaining this transaction on future discussions after the submission of the application. But it really ought to be the public entity that requests and makes application for these projects and is the primary contact. With that, I do have two questions for the record that I wanted to get out there to be answered today. One is with respect to the fees that are associated with this transaction. In one of the applications, it says issuance costs are $500,000, but then it lists $275,000 of expenses. I believe those are the expenses that are listed that are assumed to or estimated to exist as a result of the refunding itself when they occur in the future, and obviously it's not known exactly what those fees will be because the refunding is a year or 2 years off, but it doesn't match the $500,000. And I'd like for somebody to explain what is the balance there and what are the transaction costs that are related to the forward funding agreement and what has happened to date.
I can speak to that. This is Dan Marinello. Sworn in.
Yeah, I'm not swearing anybody who's not an attorney.
That would be me.
You solemnly swear, sir, the testimony about giving this proceeding before this board be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes.
And just, again, state your full name.
Daniel Marinello, NW Financial Underwriter on this transaction. And thank you for having us here today, Director. To answer your question, in both of the applications for these transactions, we listed the estimated transaction costs. That's that $274,000 number in the one. That is the estimated transaction cost for the transaction that's going to be occurring at this time, where the additional money between the 275 and the 500 listed is estimated cost for the actual refunding that will occur in the future, that we don't anticipate it being all of the same costs, but we do anticipate similar like costs at that time. So we've estimated that. Obviously, we have to put a number in there that we think is a not to exceed number, and so that's the estimate. And that is in both transactions.
Okay. And could you clearly explain what the payments are to the authority from NW Financial? And if somebody from the authority could explain what the payments will then be to the county itself, and if there's a difference between what's being provided to the authority and what's subsequently going to the benefit of the county, I'd like somebody to explain what that difference is.
The payments, this is John Hudak, the payments, the cost of issuance payments listed include the authority's fee. That's the only number taken out by the authority. The rest becomes a pass-through, because these original deals are all essentially pass-through deals in which the authority acted as the issuer and the county was the obligated party underneath. So the savings or the payment passes back through to the county underneath.
In the sources and uses where you see an option closing payment and a bond closing payment, those are not payments to the authority. Those are payments to the ultimate bondholder, the county.
To the county.
To the
So
county.
the payments are to the county themselves, not to the
Correct.
authority.
That's right.
Okay. And for the record, how long after the call dates that currently exist will NW hold the rights to the future refundings?
You know,
The you're buying the option, so after the call date, they hold the option, and as the director noted, some of these deals have been done in the past. That option remains the contractual option while the bonds are existing. If at the call date, obviously NW determines it's not economically viable to do the deal, they wait. If it becomes viable 2, 3, 5 years down the road, they can exercise the call at that time. That's the market risk that NW is taking.
So NW holds the right to do the refunding in perpetuity for the bonds.
Correct.
I don't have any other questions. If there's anybody else on the board who has questions, you can fire away. No, hearing no questions, I would ask if there's anybody from the public who would care to comment on this. Okay, if you could state your name and get sworn in, and
Okay, name is John Berry,
Spell your last name, please, sir.
B-U-R-Y.
Please solemnly swear, sir, the testimony about to give before this board is now be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
could you come to the table, please? And so you're next to this microphone so that the board members can hear you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to comment. I really appreciate that. I followed Union County government for about 4 years now, fairly closely. And I have a question, but that's at the end. First of all, there are a number of what you call one-shots in the budget as I review it. Continuing one-shots. They refinanced Union County Utilities Authority debt and got $2 million out of that. Something I'm still looking at, they seem to be taking money from the Open Space Trust Fund. No open space has been bought for quite a while, and they say you could pay parks employees with open space money. That I consider a one-shot, even though it's continuing. And this refunding says the County of Union has a need for additional revenues for budget purposes, and so they're doing it through bonding. That seems inappropriate. I mean, otherwise everybody could do that. I think it's a one-shot and shouldn't be approved. And I would also note that as far as what they're doing in the future, if you go by the Parkway, exit 138, there's a massive building going up. It's a golf clubhouse / wedding banquet hall. It's costing $1 million a month to build. It's not built yet, but there's also plans for a family courthouse, $45 million. There's discussion of 2 hockey rinks at Oak Ridge Park. They privatized the golf operations, closed one, and now they're putting in more money. This is hundreds of millions of dollars in debt on top of what's already, I estimate to be about $700 million, counting the UCIA leases. So the debt is crippling. And as far as the fees go, it was stunning, the amount of fees that are being floated, being paid because of this. Of these 4 transactions altogether, I totaled up 1.3 million, including underwriter's fees. Now, how that, I didn't look at the actual numbers behind the 3% savings, but I think it'd be fairly difficult, especially in this market, to get the interest rates that they were thinking of getting to make that 3%. And I'll finish up just with a question. So this, I asked, and other people asked at the budget meetings, some of the questions that you asked here, and nobody knew, as far as fees, as far as how much was going in the budget. It's on tape, we asked those questions, they weren't. So now I'll ask them here. If this is passed, how much will be going into this, I assume, the 2012 budget? I know it's a payment from NW Financial. And just confirming, this will not affect the layoffs at all. They are going through whether this passes or not. But if it doesn't pass, will there be more layoffs? That was it. Thank you very much.
And I would just, I would ask somebody from the county, just for the record, one more time to stipulate, what is the amount between the 2 transactions that will be provided to the county itself?
Yeah, well, obviously it's market driven, so when, at the time of the applications, on the one transaction, we estimated, I think, 987,000 at closing, and on the other transaction, it was just over $1 million.
So
Today,
it's-
currently.
So essentially, it's approximately a $2 million benefit to the county for use in their budget. Whether or not there are other cost savings that can be achieved in the county is something that the county is going to have to work out, and the citizens will have to have that discussion about what level is appropriate. We share the concerns about the fees. We'll, as part of the motion that we're going to be making, we'll be requiring fees, the specific fees that are ultimately associated with the transaction, to be filed with the board, so there's full disclosure of what they were. I think we're prepared to move forward with this. On the record at the last meeting, there were statements by the county under oath that even with this transaction, there would be approximately 200 layoffs, that with the transaction, it would minimize the layoffs by, I believe the number was approximately 35 or 50 or so employees that would not have to be laid off because of this transaction. As we all, I think everybody understands, this is kicking the can down the road a little bit, so next year the same problem's going to exist, and either those additional employees are going to have to be laid off, or there will have to be some other savings that is identified. We would also wind up making as part of the motion that the layoffs must move forward, and the levy that was discussed at the last meeting must move forward as a condition of positive findings today, because without those structural savings, this transaction will be an even larger structural problem for next year. The county's budget will ultimately be submitted to the Division of Local Government Services, which will have to review it and make sure it's in compliance with law. As stated earlier, the Deputies Attorney General have reviewed this transaction. It is lawful. The revenues can be received by the county. And as I stated earlier, this would be the last time I would approve something like this. I would agree with the commenter that it's not necessarily the greatest public policy, and it's something that should stop, but it has happened many, many, many times in the past. I don't like to change the rules 5 months into a fiscal year for people, but going forward, it's something that this may be the last one that's allowed to move forward. I appreciate the commenters' comments today. I don't think they were inappropriate at all. I commend you for your reasoned comments and the respectful nature that you made. With that, I would like, if there's no further comments, I would like to make a motion. I'll make the motion myself, to provide positive findings with respect to the transaction, except to the reasonableness of the terms of the refunding itself, because those terms will not be known for a year or 2 years at either rate when the bonds become callable. And the refunding itself will be borne by NW Financial, not the public agencies. So from the board's perspective, we're not terribly concerned. If this transaction falls through, the risk is with NW Financial. Provided, however, the positive findings are conditioned on the county, as it has previously been indicated at the last meeting on public record, that they will move forward with proposed layoffs, and that the tax levy increases presented will move forward as well. Furthermore, the positive findings are conditioned on the cost of this transaction, other than the closing costs, which we won't know for some time, being filed with the local finance board within 30 days receipt of the upfront payments by the county. This would mean, for example, all professional fees and costs related to the forward funding agreement and other preparations for today's meeting. Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second that motion.
And that's
Mr. Blee.
Mr. Blee.
Yes.
We'll take a roll call.
Mr. Neff?
Yes?
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. Blee?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Light?
Yes.
Okay. I think that concludes the meeting, so I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Mr.
Take a
Neff?
roll call, yes?
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. Blee?
Yes.
Mr. Fox? He probably signed off.
He
Mr.
voted.
Light?
Yes.
Meeting's ended.